Hey guys, it's Meg and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be showing you my top tips for creating neat aesthetic study notes a bit like these. And let's just get into it. So first things first, we need to pick a colour scheme. I recommend choosing just one colour as we're going to be creating enough differentiation with our layout of our notes. So for this setup, I'm choosing purple. I recommend getting a good highlighter that has a nice square nib for drawing neat little lines. I'm then going to be using my Tombow dual brush pens as they've got a brush tip on one end and a smaller felt tip on the other. And then you need a simple fine tip black pen that you're going to be writing the bulk of your notes in, and maybe a black brush pen if you want to get creative. But now you've got your pens, let's get started. So once you've decided which colours you're going to work with, the next thing you'll want to do is create a title. This is going to go at the top of your study note sheet, and while some people might say that spending a long time on your title is just silly and a waste of time, I think it's the main part of the notes that makes it look nice, because for the most part of the notes it's just going to be a page of words. So if we can have a nice title at the top of the page, I think it just makes the whole sheet pull together and look much more aesthetic. If you want all of your study notes to look cohesive together, then you might decide to choose a title that you're going to use on each of your pages of notes so that it all looks like it's part of the same collection of notes, if that makes sense. But I'm just going to show you a few of my favourite ways to write a title, and maybe some of these will give you a bit of inspiration as to how you'll like to do your titles. So if you would like an in-depth tutorial on any of these writing styles, then let me know. But they're all following a fairly basic hand lettering style, especially these ones at the top. And I'm using a combination of my Tombow brush pens, the black Pentel brush pen, or the other side of the Tombow brush pen. So on the other side of it, it's a dual pen. It's got a normal small coloured pen tip that you can also use. And I find those really useful just for adding a bit of variation on the writing style whilst making sure that the colour still matches. But hopefully, as you can see here, you can experiment between more extravagant titles, more simplistic ones, and sometimes just using your normal handwriting or maybe capital letters in a coloured pen can make all the difference. So have a bit of a play around, try out some of these titles and just see which one works for you. The next thing you're going to want to practice is some subheadings. So these are of course used for any of the smaller titles that you want to use on the page that's going to be beneath the main title at the top. These can be used for breaking down key parts of the topic and separating your notes into relevant sections. So again, I'm just showing you a few variations of subheadings that I've liked to use in the past, and my main tips for creating a nice and neat subheading is deciding whether you want to work in your black pen and then add a bit of colour using a line or highlighting over the top or drawing a little box around it in your colour, or whether you want to write the subheading in colour itself. Then for the main body of your notes, you're going to want to decide on some bullet points. I'd recommend, if you are creating a revision summary sheet type of thing, you're going to want to be using bullet points and keeping the notes fairly condensed and making sure you're writing everything as succinctly as possible so that when you come to read back over it, there's not loads and loads of writing that you need to be reading and memorising. But here are a few examples of how I would use bullet points. I would typically have a main bullet point and then a sub bullet point that will be indented for the extra details. But you don't need to be boring and just use a dot or a hyphen. You can experiment and use something a bit more fun. Sometimes it's nice to use a star if you want to point out some important information, or you could use a square and colour it in later when you've got time. Anything you like really, but just have a play around and see which one fits best with your note style. Then finally, you might want to consider how you're going to make certain bits of information stand out more from the page. So the three main ways that I've found looks neatest but also still helps things to stand out is boxing it either in your black pen or the coloured pen of your choice, or my other favourite is creating a little bubble in the coloured pen just so it's a little bit more cute and adds to that aesthetic. So now that you've decided on each of the individual elements that you're going to be using in your study notes, now you can actually start plotting them onto the page, and I'm going to create a little template so you can see how I would structure the page and lay out the different sections of the notes. So you're starting with your title across the top. I like to have it quite central, and I've chosen the style of using the black brush pen, and then I'm going to create a highlighted line coming out from each side just to add a bit of colour to the top of the page. Also, a little hack for you is if you flip your ruler over, then when you draw your line with the pen, you don't get as much of the pen on the side of the ruler, and then when you pull it away, it doesn't smudge. So hopefully that will help you out. The next thing I'd recommend is leaving a section at the top of the page that you can fill in at the end of your study session with a summary of everything you've learned, or a summary of the topic, depending on what this page is for. It's a really great way to test your knowledge after a study session, and it can be used for active recall in future sessions. I would also put a little box around this section. I'm going to be doing it in the black pen that I'm using to write with, just because you would normally fill in this summary section at the end. So if you create a little box that you can fill in once you're finished with the notes, then you know you've definitely got space for your summary. Next, you're going to want to leave a section for your key terms. This can be used to make a note of any important terms you feel are relevant to the topic you're studying. It can also be used for definitions of words or things you're not quite sure of, and it can be used for important formulas if you're doing a maths or science subject. I just put this in a simple box with little doodles so it looks like washi tape is sticking it to the page. It's still nice and neat, but helps it to stand out whilst adding a bit of colour and fun to the page. Then you're on to the main note-taking section, so you're going to use whichever subheading you decided you like the most. Then you've got your main notes in bullet point form beneath the relevant subheadings. You can then indent another bullet point for additional information, and I would just advise making the information as condensed as you possibly can while still including everything you need to know. You can also have your notes filling the width of the page, or you could create smaller columns depending on how wordy the section is that you're writing. This is a setup that you will just get used to, and you'll also get better at choosing which information you should include and which bits you could maybe leave out. This will ultimately make you a more efficient note taker, which is only going to make you better at studying and hopefully help you get those better grades that you're looking for. It's also useful if you have any information that you want to really make stand out, whether that's an important quote, a formula, or even a tip for your exam. You can do this by putting the information in a coloured bubble or box to help it stand out from the page at first glance. And just here I'm putting an example of how it would look if you were to make your notes in the little columns. When you're putting your notes in columns, I would still recommend using the bullet points and the indented bullet points, but it can just be useful if you've got a smaller topic or smaller pieces of information that you need to note down. Try not to worry too much about making it perfect. Remember, it is just for studying. However, I definitely found the benefits of studying from clean and neat notes, and it just made me want to revise even more when my notes were looking nice and easy to read from. But that is it for this video, so if you enjoyed, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be notified when I next upload, and I'll see you in the next one.